So, Zuko, thank you so much for making time to share your insights into the future of leadership.
Thank you,
But
Dr. Nick.
you're
Thanks for
most
the
welcome.
opportunity.
You're most welcome. It's great to have you on the show. And Zuko, before we walk into the future, can you please tell us a little bit about your background? Where did you grow up?
Interesting background. So I am originally from the Eastern Cape. I grew up in a small village, so I would call myself a village boy. Grew up in a village back in the old South Africa, went to traditional Bantu education schools back then, right up to matric, my grade 12, or standard 10 as it was called back then. I am number 5 of 6 siblings. I think one of the things that stands out in this is that I was fortunate to be part of a family that really, really believed in education. I was also fortunate to be part of a family that was very business minded. So that's a big part of my, everything that I would attribute to my success in life and my ambition and my drive is as a result of the background that I had. And when you look at the career that I ended up with, it's actually quite, for me, I get goosebumps to this day to think that coming from a rural village, venture into science, and eventually work for some of the most amazing companies and work with the most amazing people around the world. So basically that's where I come from, Dr. Nick.
Thank you. And Zuko, what was your dream career when you grew up?
So maybe what I can, do you want me to give you a brief background of
Yes,
where I am, what I do today? Maybe
please
that's for
do.
context, it would help. So I am the Africa Vice President and Country MD for Salesforce. I'm based in Johannesburg. I've been in the technology industry, Dr. Nick, for almost 3 decades now. I started at a young age, with more than half of that as an executive leader in some of the leading multinational technology companies in the world. Prior to my Salesforce leadership role in Africa, um, I had the privilege of leading a number of companies, multinationals. I launched Workday in Africa, in South Africa to be specific. Basically, was employee number 1 and built the company. Was an executive leader previous to that for a company called SAS. They are into statistics and econometrics and statistical analysis, data science. So I was their MD in South Africa, and previous to that, I worked for Oracle. Again, Oracle as an executive leader, they built new businesses. Prior to Oracle, I had the privilege actually with a friend of starting a company that was also a multinational. So to give you context, Salesforce is the third company that I am basically opened the front door, so to speak. There's a company called Esha Group, which is a leading company in the postal services technology space. I had the privilege of starting that company in Africa. So in terms of background, I have a computer science degree, and I will talk about that in some of the areas that we'll cover throughout the interview. Computer science degree and majored in computer science and statistics. So we'll get into the detail of that in the course of time.
And Zuko, when you grew up, did you always intend to have a technology career?
Actually, linking it to the background that I've just given you, Dr. Nick, where I grew up, it is actually fascinating for me to just think about where I am today because when I was young, growing up in a rural area, it was hard to plan and to think about what career one would end up in. But I think through technology or TV, in fact, one of the things that inspired me to go into science, I've always wanted to be a scientist, even though I couldn't really have a clear mind on what science meant on other than me being good in maths and physical science and my family calling me Doc, nicknaming me Doc at a very young age because they wanted me to go to medical school. But I think what really pushed me the direction that I ended up in is that back in the days, you'd remember there was a TV film called Star Trek.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed that science fiction. I watched Star Trek from the first one to a couple of ones. I think I lost track over time because there's modern they evolved the franchise for a number of years, but I recall Star Trek, The Search for Spock, the Voyage Home, The Final Frontier, and many others. So that really inspired me and really gave me insights around the potential in science. Of course, studying in a rural school, in a Bantu education school, there was a lot in science that I had to do, and I have to leave it to imagination. So TV really helped in terms of putting that into perspective and making me dream big to go to university and study science.
And Zuko, can you tell us who inspired you in your early days?
Very, very interesting question. I reflect on this every now and then. I would say I was very fortunate to get inspiration from my family at a very young age. I grew up in a home where my parents ran a business, what was called a general dealer back in those days. Basically, we sold everything from food to clothes to building material. We had a petrol station, we're a postal agency. It was an all-rounded kind of business. At a very young age, in my teens already, I had to understand what running a business meant. I think the biggest in terms of inspiration, because it's not only about things like that, it's also about the values and the qualities. One that I would attribute to my father, my late father, is humility, tenacity in life. I learned to be humble at a very, very young age, and I'm eternally grateful for that. Of course, within that family, the driver behind the business brain was basically my maternal grandfather. His prowess in building businesses was just so inspirational for me. So that's another person. The other one that I think it just makes sense in terms of career and everything that I ended up doing, just as a validation of my ambitions and my dreams to go into science, is one of my grandfathers on the maternal side as well, my mother's father's brother, who we called Grandpa Wilkie. He was a professor in mathematics. He was one of the best people that I knew in mathematics. His name, Professor T.W. Kambula. He ended up having a building that was named after him at Wits University. And you can only imagine how inspiring that was for most of us as a family. So he's got a building that's named after him. It's called the T.W. Kambule Mathematical Sciences Building at Wits University. He was the first Black professor. And again, I'm emphasizing Black professor because, as you can imagine, in the old South Africa, as a youngster living in a rural area, it was important to look up to people that, against all odds, were able to make it in the highest echelons in this country. He was the first Black professor of the University of Witwatersrand, and this is something that I'm proud of, and it really inspired me. He was the first Black person to be awarded an honorary membership to the Actuarial Society of South Africa. That's something significant. I think what the country also recognized him. He was awarded to the Order of the Baobab in 2002 for his services in mathematical education. So that's quite significant for me. Last but not least, obviously there's external people that inspired me, but I'll limit this to my family because I think this is the foundation of who I am today. I also had an aunt, my mother's sister, who was a senior librarian at the University of Fort Hare. She always quizzed us and encouraged us to read books. This for me has really to this day, I love reading, and it's thanks to my aunt who really, really inspired me in a big way and structured me in terms of being, understand that the power of reading a book, how a book can take you to places that you've never been before. So the list is endless, Dr. Nick. I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you. And Zuko, looking back over your career, can you tell us, was there a turning point, maybe a major turning point where things could have gone different and you decided to go this way?
A very, very interesting question. Very interesting question. And it's interesting for me because I've had several turning points. If you don't mind, if you indulge me, I'll take you through ones that really, really stand out. As per my background, coming from a village upbringing, and not having access to things that could have channeled one into what career possibilities are out there. You know, as a young black child back in the days, like most families, it was either you'd be a teacher or you'd be a lawyer or you'd be a doctor. My parents wanted me to go to medical school, and there's no other reason other than the fact that I majored in maths and science in high school. So the logical path was medical school. So because of my desire to be a scientist, even though I couldn't really articulate what I wanted to do as a scientist, I decided on a Bachelor of Science degree
Right.
as my undergrad. So I majored in computer science. Mind you, I knew nothing about computers. As you can imagine, computers were quite young back in those, well, not young, but the internet, it was before the internet, so I didn't know much about computer science. But I decided to venture into computer science. I registered for a computer science and statistics degree. Those were my two majors. Halfway through my undergrad degree, and this is one of the turning points, I decided to change to commerce. I think this was influenced by my background, the exposure to business at a very young age. I still majored in computer science. That was the core of my interests. What's interesting today when I reflect back on this is that one of the modules that I did in computer science, or actually a special module, an elective that you could choose, was artificial intelligence. Little did I know that AI would be a force to reckon with many decades later. So for me, it's actually quite interesting because when I did artificial intelligence back then, it was possibly 3 decades old already, and 3 decades later, after I did artificial intelligence in university in my undergrad, it is a force to reckon with today. But another significant turning point that's worth mentioning, Dr. Nick, is I started my career because of the computer science background. Like most people, I started my career as a developer. I used to be a coder. I moved up, was a software architect. And the biggest turning point on that is that at a very early stage in my computer science career, my technology career, I transitioned into business development. And what really influenced me is a number of things around that. Is my background, number one. Number two is the fact that I was fortunate to work with organizations where the leaders at the time saw a potential that I had in terms of being an extrovert and a people's person and someone who could have conversations with people. And that's how I transitioned into business development, into sales, into an executive that I am today.
So, Zuko, what would you say is driving you today?
Thank you for the question, Dr. Nick. There are a variety of factors that inspire me, to take initiative, motivating others. I really, really, really love watching people do things that they never thought they'd be able to achieve. And I think that is part of the motivation element as a leader. As you see people achieve their goals and doing things that they never thought they'd be able to do. So that really, really drives me. Some of the key drivers, of course, vision and purpose is something that's really, really important. Passion for what I do. I'm really passionate. I do things that I have a strong passion for because I believe that when I do that, I really enjoy it. Making a difference in people's lives. Personal growth is something that's important. Influence and legacy. I'm at a point in my life where I want to be remembered for something that made a difference in this world. So that is something that's really, really important. It drives me, empowering others, as I've mentioned already, challenges and achievements is something that's really, really important. I think to sum it up, Dr. Nick, I believe purpose is a foundational element for effective leadership. This becomes clearer and clearer as one grows in a career, and it has happened with me. It provides a direction, inspires and motivates, it builds trust, credibility, fosters resilience, encourages innovation, most importantly, enhances team cohesion and performance, and attracts and retains talent. We are at a war for talent. People join companies for various reasons, but I think one of the things that is important, they join because of the leaders that are in these organizations. So I believe that leaders who operate with a strong sense of purpose are better equipped to drive meaningful and lasting success. The last thing that I'll mention, if you do not mind, is I strongly believe that some leaders might feel differently about this, but I believe there is a correlation in what we do professionally and what we do in our personal lives. One of the things that I do is that I've been a cyclist and an ultra marathon runner for more than 20 years. I believe this correlation is a correlation between high performance. There's a correlation between high performance in sport and leading high performance teams. I always stretch myself to new heights, and that is one of the things that drives me. I think it's really, really important to just make that point. It's outside the office as well. There are things that really drive me, and cycling and running are those things.
Great. Thank you, Zuko. Now, looking into the future, and I know it's a big question, but what does the future of leadership mean to you?
I would say, and I'm learning this all the time, it's emotional intelligence is one of them. I'd say number one, emotional intelligence. Leaders need to demonstrate, it's becoming more and more apparent the significance of empathy. And we saw this during the COVID pandemic. It's really, really important, self-awareness and strong interpersonal skills to connect and inspire teams. It's something that's really important. I'd say number one is that. Number two, I think with everything that's happening at a very rapid pace in the world, the ability to adapt quickly to changing environments, technology, and market conditions. Leaders must be agile and open to continuous learning. That's the second point I would mention. The third point I think is important is global mindset. People have been talking about this global village for many, many years. The world is becoming more and more interconnected. Therefore, leaders need to have a global perspective, understand cross-cultural dynamics and be able to lead diverse, geographically dispersed teams. That's really, really important.
And Zuko, what would you say? What have you learned from your own leadership journey that you consider most important for building future leaders? In other words, what is it we have to do more to develop, build, and encourage future leaders?
I think, again, it goes back to one of the points I mentioned earlier. My biggest learnings is the significance or the importance of being humble as a leader. It's humility is something that's really important. Again, I was fortunate to have this, to be inspired by my father around this. He used to say that true humility is not about lowering yourself, but about lifting others. I truly believe that helping others, putting others on our shoulders, and because we are here because we've been on the shoulders of giants, that humility for me is something that's really, really important. I believe that humility in leadership is not about a weakness or self-depreciation. It's about recognizing one's limitations, valuing others, and fostering an environment of trust, collaboration, and continuous improvement. This leads to stronger teams. At the end of the day, as a leader, you need to make sure that your teams are led. It leads to better decision-making and a more resilient and innovative organization.
Now, Zuko, these are challenging times as the world is stumbling from one crisis into the next. What is your advice for future leaders in terms of challenges? What are some of the biggest challenges they should expect to encounter and hopefully overcome in their career?
Again, it's a very interesting question considering how rapidly things are changing, and the future workforce is getting more and more complex. All of us as leaders appreciate that. The future of leadership will be characterized by a blend of traditional leadership skills, the things that leaders have been doing for many, many years. But I think what's just as important is new competences, that are tailored to an increasingly complex and dynamic world. Leaders will need to navigate digital transformation and leverage data-driven decision-making. Artificial intelligence is a reality and is evolving at a rapid pace. So leaders, it is important that we familiarize ourselves and we become more and more digitally literate. I think it's something that's quite important.
Right. And Zuko, if you were to design a curriculum for future leaders, what are some of the key skills you would want to factor in and maybe teach?
Again, Dr. Nick, digital literacy is at the core of everything that I believe is significant, is important. There was a recent study. I'm trying to remember who did the study now, but it was a study on the fourth industrial revolution in South Africa. Basically, the study says that it says 4IR is expected to amount to a value of about 1.4 trillion rands by 2026. This is a very fast moving train. It is important for us as leaders that we understand the power of the digital evolution that's happening currently. I do believe that more than evolution, we are in a digital revolution. So leaders, the biggest skill I'd say is digital literacy, without a doubt.
Now, Zuko, as a mentor to many future leaders, can you maybe share a success story or two where you mentored an upcoming leader and that person took your advice to heart?
Yeah, this is something that's close to my heart, Dr. Nick. I have a few, but I think in the interest of time, I'll focus on one for now. Just over a decade ago, I hired a very self-driven young man who back in those days, I had a role that where I had a team in South Africa and a team in Dubai. So I shipped him to my team in Dubai. He worked from Dubai, worked closely with me. Within a period of 2 years, he was a high performer, and I promoted him because of his stellar performance. Year on year, it was clear that this was a young upcoming leader. It didn't take long before he was recruited in the same organization that I was with to a management role, actually in the US, not even in South Africa. So, of course, at the time, it was a bit of a loss for me in terms of working with him directly. But I think what I really, really loved was the growth that he was going to get working in the US, because I've had the pleasure of working for multinationals, and I know the power of being exposed in different geographies, what it does to a young mind. So this gentleman today, whom I'm still close to, and is not only a mentee but is a friend today, is a key executive leader in another company, managing high performance teams and doing amazing things. I'm still in touch with him. The conversations there. The most amazing thing for me is that he started as a mentee, but today is a friend, and we now learn from each other. We compare notes. We talk about leadership, and this for me is something that's really, really heartwarming.
And Zuko, are there any role models of leadership that you encountered and maybe worked with in your career that you would recommend future leaders should learn from?
So, yeah, I have a few. I'll just summarize it. I'll be brief around this. I truly believe that we need to be all-rounded when we're looking at role models. I have role models that are obviously in my space. I've been for almost 30 years in the tech space, so it goes without saying that I'll be inspired. I'll have role models that are in my industry. My current CEO, Mark Benioff, is one of my role models. What's interesting is that before I joined Salesforce, one of my role models in the tech space was actually a mentor to Mark Benioff. This is none other but Steve Jobs. So Mark Benioff worked for Apple for many years ago, and Steve Jobs was his mentor. Steve Jobs was known for his vision, Dr. Nick, as you would know, innovation and ability to inspire the teams to create revolutionary products. So that's one. That's from I'd say from a business perspective. Of course, political role models are just as important because they help us frame and change the world to what it is today. It goes without saying, Nelson Mandela, who is known as a huge leader globally, who fought against apartheid. His commitment to reconciliation and his ability to inspire change. He's definitely a role model that I think is important to study and understand. For me, as someone who is active in sport, there are people that inspire me in sport, good role models. I can't name them all, but if I were to single out one, I'd say Serena Williams. She's known for excellence in tennis, resilience, and advocacy for gender equality and social justice. And I particularly like her because I think we need to ensure that whatever we do, equality is at the core of what we do. I'm a father to a daughter child, and it is important that we understand gender equality and social justice in general is important. Last but not least, thought leaders. There's many of thought leaders that I think are role models, but one that I would single out again, I choose a woman again, Dr. Nick. Oprah Winfrey, for her media influence, entrepreneurial spirit, and philanthropic efforts. I really love the philanthropic efforts that are done by a number of leaders. In fact, the role model that I look at, I also look at what are they doing to help change the world. And Oprah Winfrey is one of those. In fact, all of these are part of changing the world. So thought leaders exemplify various qualities such as vision, resilience, the empathy that I mentioned earlier, ethical behavior, and the ability to inspire and drive change. Studying these role models' lives and leadership styles can provide valuable insights and inspiration for aspiring leaders.
Thank you. Thank you, Zuko. Now, where can our listeners follow you and how can they connect with you?
So I am on most social platforms. I think the most important one to mention, obviously, from a professional point of view, I am very, very active on LinkedIn. So I share my thought leadership. I study a lot. I learn what people are doing from connected to the global world. So LinkedIn is, I would say, is the go-to. It's my Zuko Mdwaba is my profile. The other social media platforms, I'm not as active, but I am active, but I would say LinkedIn is the one that to follow.
And Zuko, last but not least, what is your message to the millions? Last but not least, Zuko, what is your message to the millions of learners out there who are looking to finish school, to start a career? What are maybe one or two success principles they should keep in mind?
I think for me, the most important lesson is, playing the long game. It's really, really, really important to play the long game. At a very young age, I've always set myself goals, whether it's a 5-year goal, 10-year goal, 15-year goal, 20-year goal. And, when out of doing that, I've realized that I actually achieved these goals earlier than what I targeted because I'm very conscious and deliberate about what I do. So I think playing the long game is something that's really important. Of course, being an ultra marathon runner and an ultra distance cyclist, that helps you understand that, it's not about, this is not a race. It's not a short distance race. It's an ultra marathon. You have to plan. And the other thing, you have to refuel every now and then. We live in a world that is, there's a lot that's coming at us. It is important that all of us find ways to have a balance so that we can bring the best version of ourselves to everything that we do on a daily basis. So the short answer for me is that long-term, planning for the long term. I think it's something that's quite important. Obviously, driven by core values that speak to what you, to what drives you. Those core values are really, really important. And having those core values as your anchor point, as your North Star. Core values have to be a North Star, have to be something that you reflect on. They can't just be core values that are sitting on a wall. You need to reflect on those, which through mindfulness, which I think is one of the most important things in life. It is important to reflect every now and then. It is important. Mindfulness is, I would say, arguably one of the most important things for not only for leaders, but for human beings. Reflecting on what you're going through, journaling, it's the power of mindfulness. I do that on a daily basis. I journal my thoughts. I think that's something that's quite important. It's part of my reading regime as well. Personal growth is another thing that's quite important. Discipline and responsibility. Discipline is at the core of anything that anyone does in the world. And having a growth mindset is the other thing that's really, really important. All of us, we need to have a growth mindset. There's a lot of negativity that's out in the world, and we need to continuously have that growth mindset. I find that that's what fuels me. That's what keeps me sane. So I would end at that, Dr. Nick.
Thank you. Zuko, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your wisdom into the future of leadership and for inspiring so many future leaders.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for your time, Dr. Nick.